thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. I'm Jim Cardle. Well, as the legislature is now back in session, Comptroller Glenn Hager's released his budget estimate. All eyes are on the legislative process of passing a budget, school finance, and much, much more at the legislature. We thought it'd be useful to provide an overview with our Texas Insider Economic Council Chairman, Mark Flaster, who's going to talk about state budget, oil and gas prices, what's going on in the oil patch, and much, much more on this edition of Texas Insider Television. Well, Texas Insider Economic Council Chairman Mark Flaster, we appreciate you coming in today to give us a 2019 outlook. Appreciate you joining us.
It's always my pleasure to be here, rain or shine, and unfortunately today is a little drizzly.
A little bit of the winter weather. I'm going to jump right in because I know you got a plane to catch and are on the tail end of a couple-day visit with your clients and so forth, financial advisors. Let me ask you first off, because a lot of our listeners will have seen and wondered about the stock market volatility. There's the government shutdown, the little Chinese trade discussion, but with all this volatility in the market, number one, what is maybe behind it? And number two, is there a correlation between the Nancy Pelosi Democrats in the House and the question of a quote-unquote divided government? What's some of the things you see and are hearing about the volatility in the stock market these days?
I'm going to say that's a large question to answer.
Yes.
And I don't know I can do it justice. Let me first say that the stock market is a Me Too market, and it's a follow the leader. So when the reaction to the Jobs Act was heralded as a encouragement for a 3.5% to 4% GDP growth.
And you're talking about the tax cut last year, the Tax Cut Jobs Act,
right.
Yes.
That the first thing that happened was that the expectation that this would happen encouraged investors to buy into the market. And what they found initially is that companies were not using those monies that were available from the Tax Act to build more company, but to buy back their stock.
Mm-hmm.
And so the stocks started to go up and pay more dividend.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, my goodness, they said, this is really this is really what we want. We want the stock prices to go up. And if they're buying their stock and there's a limited number of shares, why shouldn't, we should participate here because this is going to work out. And it sure did. We went up thousands of points on the index.
Fueled its own rally, so to speak.
Yes, and it continued. And it continued until the fall. And the abrupt change, it had lots of ups and downs. And the trade thing was involved in some of these daily occurrences. But the limit was, I think, was found when the over exuberance was recognized that maybe we're paying more than the company's worth, and because so many people were or so much activity became automatic. It was in a computer. The computer programs were redesigned to catch the rise, not to catch the fall. And they said, so as they saw it rise, they said, well, we'll put more in because it's going our way. And the reports that came out to the investors said, oh, look, here's where you were and here's where you are, and making more money. We'd like more money so that we can continue to participate, or you can continue to participate in this performance. And so more money came in. That meant there was more money to participate in the markets. Meanwhile, the companies were continuing to buy back their stock.
So the stock market's often referred to as a predictor of future corporate income.
No, that has nothing.
Not the case anymore?
It never was. The stock market has always been a siren call, and
really
those people that have made any significant money have made it by finding a company that was either emerging, undervalued because they came up with a product that no one knew that it existed, an Amazon product, some of the things that are on the front page.
Mm-hmm.
One area that I find absolutely phenomenal that no one is paying attention to is women's cosmetics.
Really?
Okay? Because you cannot, here's the thing, okay? Today, if you're sitting at home, you can order anything from anywhere. And if you don't like it, or it doesn't fit, or you don't like the color or whatever, you can return it. And in most cases, the return is for free.
Including cosmetics and
No,
apparel?
No,
and
in cosmetics you cannot.
Not yet, gotcha.
Because you can't, because you have damaged the product. You
Uh,
used it. So once you bought it, you own it. And if you don't like it, it has to be thrown away. The company's not going to take it back. Yet you go anywhere else or buy anything else, especially in clothing, for example, or hard goods, it's not damaged. You open it up, you looked at it, you tried it on, you didn't like it, you tried it, put it in the socket, it ran a little bit, made too much noise, or didn't provide the coffee, mixture you wanted, and you send it back.
mm-hmm.
And you get your money back.
Okay, well, let me not have us go into the rabbit trail of the cosmetics, although we may do that later. But in terms of the more liberal Democrat being in politics as opposed to the financial aspects, in the politics of a Nancy Pelosi and a more liberal progressive House of Representatives, do the markets pay right now? Are they paying attention to that for future activity?
Well, I think what the markets or the investors see, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
markets, there's a whole collection of different opinions and activities, but I think what they see is we had a very activist president and Congress during Obama's years, and it basically caused an interruption in our growth, and in some cases, some damage,
Okay.
especially to the banks and the lending sphere, which created some needs that we'll talk about how the Fed reacted to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now what it sees is that you have a activist on the other side who's trying to undo all this, and those that believe that they carry the populist opinion, okay, and that they need to rein him in. And so the only way to rein in the Republican agenda is that they don't have enough force to initiate anything different, but what they feel they can do is stop anything new. So they've become obstructionists.
So discussion of a green economy, discussion of a minimum wage increase, discussion of a Medicare for all, those aren't really necessarily penetrating investors' outlook because of the gridlock, so to speak.
Yeah. So they think, well, none of this is going to happen now. Okay, the question is, can at the next election, and as we've talked about, is my view that the Democratic majority now has recognized that they can't impeach the man, and that's a wrong way to go, and it will probably cause more damage than benefit. And so they said, well, we got an election coming up. Let's focus our attention on election. So let's bring to fore all the issues, all the platforms that we'd like to sponsor an election, and we'll use that as a sounding board to see how many people support us. So by the time we get ready, okay, for the actual event of defining who our leadership is going to be, we will have already gone through a whole schematic, an alphabet of platforms, and we now have a better idea of what, so to speak, what flies and what doesn't.
Well, you and I will be talking about that more in the future. I know we've already got Elizabeth Warren declared, Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand forming exploratory committees. But I want to pivot a little bit and talk about the Texas economy if I can. And folks, again, thanks for joining us for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by the Texas Alliance of Energy Producers. We're visiting with Mark Flaster, the chairman of the Texas Insider Economic Council. How about, Mark, the recent, locally at least here in Texas, gas prices are going through the floor. We've got a great production continuing out in the Permian Basin and West Texas. What are you seeing in terms of economic activity, and what's the Texas outlook? Because reason I ask is because we're coming into our legislative session.
Well, Texas is identified as being a energy center. Houston has been identified as being the epicenter of
energy capital of the world,
energy, and that is fading, and it's slowly, but only because, mostly because
really?
there's a lot of wealth that's being created in the energy sector. Yes, but if you drive around Houston or Dallas, what do you see more than anything else? Healthcare. And healthcare is the biggest issue in this nation.
In terms of new companies forming?
No, in terms of
relocation.
The biggest hospitals are in Dallas and Houston.
Responding to the population growth, I guess.
But also the fact that all the money, or a lot of the money that's being brought to the surface from the energy of mining, a lot of that is being spent into the healthcare area. So donations are huge, and they responded to that. So then from that, you have an economy that was very small in terms of distribution of effort, and that is growing as the northeastern states and some of those states that are highly democratic have put so much burden on their people that businesses are leaving, and they're moving, or youngsters are leaving, and they're moving to an area where a state, particularly Texas is a good example, where there's more freedom of opportunity, easier lifestyle, lot less costly. You may complain about the cost of things in real estate, but believe
Here
me,
in Austin, yeah.
Austin may be an anomaly, but compared to New York City or any area around New York City, Austin is cheap. Okay, believe me. But the big thing is that you have a dynamic that is sponsoring growth. The banks here are very aggressive in seeking out opportunity. They've been, especially this last year when the Fed was pushing interest rates up, the lending activity was not only profitable from developing loans, but it was also the most profitable instrument that they could create, because the cost of the return from those investment those loans was higher than any investment that they could make.
Interesting.
So the bond market suffered because no one was participating, okay, and the lending market created lots of products that were either resorted or moved to another location, to maybe insurance companies who are looking for investments for their own needs. But most importantly, it was a highly contagious opportunity to use the money and to build. So what we have happened here, and particularly in the Houston areas, we have overbuilding, and we have a lot of reports of companies moving in, of things happening in the area. But on the other side, the development has been ahead of that, and so we have buildings that are half empty. We have warehouses that don't have tenants. We have houses that have been overpriced. And one of the reasons they've been overpriced is, while all this is going on, other events have increased the cost of material, and so the cost of material has now become a function of the cost of the house. So the house is not valued in terms of the market says there's 2 houses and there's 5 people looking for them. The house value is because every window, every piece of wood that went into the house, the United States, under Mr. Trump, put a tariff on lumber. Okay? Most of our building lumber comes from Canada, so that immediately increased the cost of building lumber.
Speaking of other events, and folks, again, I want to mention that we're visiting with Mark Flaster, chairman of the Texas Insider Economic Council. Other events that have been in the news recently have to do with the Middle East oil and gas production. Thought I'd get your inputs of how strong is OPEC right now?
Well, it's very simple. I've written about this often, that people follow the headlines. They don't follow the countries that are providing those headlines. These countries are bankrupt. They have a problem similar to many others in that area, in where that their governments are being threatened by people who would like to replace them, and for many reasons.
So interesting, if I can interrupt. They're bankrupt because their oil and gas revenue prices
because they
decreased.
In order to let me finish. In order to satisfy the populace that they are doing something for them. They have to increase their budget and become more more socially aware, and they have to then find more revenue to support that. So their share of the world's production has been reduced because we're now the largest producer in the world, and that puts competition in. So $100 oil is out of sight. Okay, we're somewhere in $50 or $60, and I believe that that's going lower. It could be a lot lower.
Okay.
And we could be back to the $25, $30 barrel somewhere down the line.
Really?
But a lot of that's coming from the fact that the only resource they have for foreign currency is oil, and so they have to produce it, and they have a population that wants the benefits of all. They hear all these services that people are receiving benefits, and they say, here's a country that's very poor, and people live in a very low standard of living, and they look at their potentates today because everything is on the internet, it's all on the TV set, and they're walking around like the Maharaja. Okay, wrong element because that's Indian, but
I get
they
your
have problems
drift.
too.
Yes.
But and they say, well, how do we participate? Okay, if you didn't see the movie Crazy and Rich Asians, it was a very
It explains
then he explained it was very moving, and that any ethnic group, Jews particularly, could have related to the things that were going on in terms of but the fact that there was so much money and it was without no concern of how much you spent, just over the top at all levels.
I did notice the other day an article in the Wall Street Journal or someplace about U.S. oil and gas production being up 28% in 2019 from 2017. I guess that's what you're referring to. It is actually having an impact on Middle Eastern countries. How about Russia? Another one probably that has to produce as well.
But you're dealing with countries, China, the Saudis, and the OPEC group, and Russia, who have managed economies, who the leadership determines the distribution of monies to the areas that they want to sponsor, where we don't have that here. So when you see a government that's faced with a lot of a largesse that is focused on a very small representation of the population, and this large group of people feels energized to the point that they're willing to demonstrate, they're willing to take to the street, they're willing to put their own lives at risk. The government heads to sit there, and I said before, I said in some areas of the world, when they change the head of government, they start right at the shoulders, and so they all fear for their lives and say, well, we have to spend more money for these people, and if we're not going to give up our lifestyle, we're not changing what we're doing. So here's what we need, okay, which is everything, and then we're going to find additional money to satisfy them, and so in order to find additional money, we'll say we'll jack up, we'll constrain the development, the supply of oil that we put on the market. In the meantime, the U.S. has nowhere near found all the availability it can find, and the technology has become so much cheaper, and the success has increased to a level that almost daily there's new production coming online. And then you have a North Slope that was just found, that whole North Sea thing had been put to rest, and now they found a whole new find there. Alaska, they found a new find up there. You've got a couple of countries in Africa who have now reached out and they found some oil there, and so the control is not as in their hands anymore, and yet they're now threatened that they need the money.
Well, good comments there, folks.